Hello everybody, I'm Ramsis.
And I'm TheVespor.
And we just got back from GalaxyCon 2024 in Columbus, the 3-day event that took place from December 6th to December 8th.
And now we continue with part 2 of our review of GalaxyCon Columbus 2024. Be sure to check out part 1 if you're curious to see how our first day at the event went.
Saturday, December 7th.
So Saturday came around, and we knew from last year and even the year before, Saturday is going to be the craziest day of the convention, and it is the craziest day of the convention. Also, you have to get there super early. So the first event starts at 11, but the exhibit itself opens at 10. So you got to get there well before 10 o'clock, or forget it. You're not getting parking. You're not getting in. You're going to deal with a huge crowd. You're going to deal with madhouse. So we left our hotel at 8 o'clock. And then we were like, all right, we have a little time to kill. We're going to get the parking. And then we're going to do a tradition that we started also 2 years ago, which is go to the Starbucks that is located within Greater Columbus Convention Center.
But here's something different. And Ramsey's had a great idea on this. And we're going to do this next year as well. And that is bring food from the hotel for lunch so you save on money.
And we were at the convention center at about 9 o'clock, maybe 8:45. No crowd yet. Over 1 hour before the event starts. Perfect. All right, so we pulled into the same exact spot, by the way, we used yesterday.
So after we got there, we got our Starbucks, and we did the smartest thing possible. We sat down in a chair and just waited. We watched as just a continuous line of people, without badges, mind you, start marching up past us and down the hall, down the escalator, towards the registration. These were most likely going to be our one-day eventers. But we also noticed that there was a disproportionate amount of Hazbin Hotel cosplayers.
Yeah, everybody and their mother and their brother and their sister and their daughter was wearing Hazbin Hotel gear, because today is the Hazbin Hotel Q A, and of course they saved that for Saturday at 1:15, right in the prime center of the event. So yeah, it was crazy. Every Hazbin Hotel cosplayer you can imagine was showing up, and a lot of them did not have tickets yet because they were only here for the Hazbin Hotel Q A and to meet the Hazbin Hotel voice actors. So it was getting really, really crowded. So me and Vesper finished up our coffee, and they were like, well, you know something, Vesper, before it gets too crazy, we better head down there and get within the crowd, because this is going to be a madhouse. The good news for us is we already got our autographs, so everything is gravy. We can do whatever we want now, except for the exhibit hall, as you're going to find out in a few minutes why that's going to be impossible.
Look at how packed this is, and most of this is just registration people. And here's even the better part. We decided to do something a little bit different. We time-stamped this so you could actually see this line as we come and go throughout the day.
It never stops. The line to register gets longer and longer and more crowded and more busy and more crazy. I'll just keep on going back to this. You'll see what time all these samples of the registration. And you know, everyone here just bought the Saturday pass. That's all they're here for. Thousands of people are going to be here today. You thought it was crowded yesterday? That is nothing, my friend.
So after we took our pictures, we did filter in with the crowd, and we got in there, and we wanted to give you a quick view of the hall. Since we couldn't do it on Friday, we just didn't have time to do it. And so here's some footage of us going around showing you just how big the vendor area is. After doing that, we went over and we wanted to take a look. How bad are the autographs? Because last year we showed you pictures of Peter Cullen, and it was gigantic. Well, look here. Look at this one strange line that's leading straight into the middle of the autograph area. Who do you think that is for, Ramsey?
Weird Al, there's Ernie Hudson, George Takei, Kiefer Sutherland. Lots of big names here. Well, no, it was not for any of those people. Even though some of them did have big lines, it was for Hayden Christensen. And it is sort of a secret to you guys, but not a secret to Vesper. I am not a big fan of Hayden Christensen. It's not even that, oh, I hate the prequel movies. I hated his acting in the prequel movies. I know, throw rocks at me, I don't care. Especially in the second movie, that was just awful. We're not going to do a review of that here. But his line was giganormous. Everyone had Star Wars memorabilia up the wazoo that they wanted him to sign. He was in his little private booth. It was kind of like Weird Al, except even more secluded, like it was the closed curtains. And he was charging a lot. He was over $200 for his autograph. And I had zero interest. I was probably the only one there that couldn't care less that Hayden Christensen was there. I really just don't care about the guy. I'm sorry.
And you can see here that we've looked at some of the other lines here. Here's some pictures. Generally, more people everywhere. And where they moved the celebrities to this corner is much better. Problem last year was no matter what you did, that little corner where the vendors meet the gaming area was just too crowded and packed. You could not move in there. Now you have some room to move, and they have bigger lines. So this worked out for the best.
Yes, but we're not going to be able to buy anything because there are a gigaplex of Q&As we want to do today. The lines are crazy. The mob scene in this exhibit hall is crazy also. So we're like, all right, what's first on the list? And there is someone we really wanted to see. At 11 a.m., it's going to be Zach Galligan, and that's the star of Gremlins movies. He played Billy in both Gremlins and Gremlins 2. He's also in some other movies, but let's be honest, he's known as Billy in the Gremlins duology of movies. So we were like, you know, let's start our Q&A. It's definitely not going to be crowded because everybody is in the exhibition hall. So we knew that this is not going to be crowded. Zach Galligan is a very 80s star, so you have to be our age to really want to see the guy. And we really wanted to see him, so that's what we decided to do. We'll go there, and then maybe after that, we'll try to do some shopping, see if things die down a little bit.
Now, before we show you some footage of Zach Galligan, I do want to point out that this crowd really was a more mature crowd, although there were some younger people here which were true fans of the Gremlins franchise. This is where we start to notice some things from yesterday. It's continuing on. What I mean by this, it's the moderators. The moderators for Zach Galligan were two members of the Inglorious Trexters, and last year they gave us some very good moderation on guests, and they continue to do so, which was far better than Joe Jr., as we still like to call him.
You mean Tyler Woods, Vesper?
Yes, but I still prefer to call him Joe Jr.
Yes.
The Inglorious Trexters were amazing in the fact that they did an actual intro. They showed movie trailers for Gremlins and Gremlins 2 before introducing him, and we were like, oh yes, this is absolutely the most amazing thing ever.
It's such a simple thing, and I've said this to Vesper for 3 years now. Why aren't they playing music related to the star? Such an obvious thing to do, and only the Inglorious Trexters are able to figure this out, that it makes such sense. You get the crowd into it by having some footage related to them, and there you go.
Here's something I do want to point out, though. The Inglorious Trexters, good or bad, they know how to warm up a crowd, which is something that a lot, and I do mean a lot, of the moderators fail to do at this con.
Yeah, so Zach came out, he was excited, he's waving the crowd, and it's not a huge crowd, and that's not due to Zach Galligan, that's due to the mob scene is either on the registration line or in that exhibition hall getting autographs, and that's fine. It was nice to have a nice quiet crowd. The Trexters warmed it up very nicely. They didn't really talk too much about the minute and who cares stuff. They got right into it. So, what was it like acting on Gremlins? And he talked about his meeting Phoebe Cates. That was the co-star of the first Gremlins, and he was very excited. He was like, wow, because she was a huge star at the time. He's right, we forget this, but she was actually over at this time. She was in like every popular early 80s movies you could think of. And then Zach Galligan, he was 18 in actuality, but I think he was playing a 16-year-old in this. And don't forget, Hollywood, we can do that. He was acting like a guy, which is cool, you know? Nowadays, it's in bad taste to do that. Oh, she was hot. Oh, she was pretty. Oh, I had a crush on her. He wasn't ashamed. He was like, hey, I was a kid at the time. And she kept mentioning, I have a boyfriend. I have a boyfriend. She knew what he was up to here, but she still remained very good friends with him. So that's how it all started off. It was a great story. And then he got into the whole, you know, fun moments of working with the special effects. We all wonder, like in 1984, how are they pulling this off? It was just a lot of creative stuff. It just shows what movie making was in the early 80s. You had to be very creative. You had to do a lot of camera tricks where you stopped the camera, switch things out, and you didn't realize that the scene ended.
So basically, Gremlins has become a Christmas movie, and I'm thrilled about that. I mean, part of me is partially convinced, you know, not fully convinced, but partially convinced that if it wasn't for the sort of seasonal theme in the movie, Gremlins may not have survived, you know, all 40 years. I think, you know, one of the things that's nice about it is we force you to watch it every December whether you want to or not. So you just, whether you want to forget it or not, you can't. It's just kind of shoved in your face. And so it's like, it's Christmas, hey, it's Gremlins time. You're like, oh yeah. So thank God for the seasonality, because it just is the gift that keeps on giving.
We also forgot that there was a very young Corey Feldman in the movie. That was his best friend, and he had a lot of stories on Corey Feldman as well.
Yeah, and the most important part about this was that Zach Galligan was just amazing. He brought the energy. He knew what he was talking about. And when the fans got up to question him, oh, he came to life. He wasn't the same shy guy that was there Friday. I think that he probably heard a lot more stories like mine that said, you are a big part of my childhood when I was growing up. I absolutely love the Gremlins franchise. I love what it stood for. I loved your acting. And I think he just came about. I think he was a little bit worried because, Gremlins is an old franchise. They've tried to bring it back multiple times, but it's always failed. But he did allude to the fact that they are trying to get a third movie out, and it will not be a reboot because the rights owner for this refuses to have it rebooted because of all the horror stories of all these new old franchises being rebooted.
Right, so somehow he would be involved. So he's very excited. He's hoping it happens. The problem is Warner Brothers, who's the right owner of the Gremlins franchise, have tried to cater, quote unquote, to the current generation. Every company does this, and they can't understand why it fails because they're catering only to the younger generation and not the fans. So they're doing cartoons, and it's not that good. It really isn't. So they're going to use this as the excuse of why they can't do a movie. Well, it's just not popular enough. We're trying. But no, if you did the movie right, I think it would do well. But of course, these studios are not going to. So I don't think there's going to be a Gremlins 3, but here's hoping that it will happen. And then finally it got to the fans, and that's when things got really interesting.
And he answered every question to the best that he could, and he was able to finish up the line of questions because, like we said, this wasn't a very big panel, but he gave very good, detailed answers. And then once it was over, it was time to head out.
So we go into the exhibit hall, and we buy these really cool pictures. We wanted to get something. It was packed, it was crazy, so we couldn't really look around, but we went to a great art dealer who had every single Transformer you could think of written in art style as a separate picture. Every single 80s icon. I bought some Transformers stuff, VESPR bought some Godzilla stuff, and it was amazing. Great. So we were killing some time because our next panel is going to be at 12:30 that we wanted to do. So we're like, all right, we still have time, because there's really nothing that we want to do except to buy some stuff, and we did. And we're like, something? We've had no trouble at all putting this stuff back in our car. We have a great parking spot. Let's just go, even though it's crowded, whatever, these people are on the registration line, it won't be a big deal. Let's go back to our car, put everything away, and then we're going to come back. So then we're walking out the exit, and it's weird. I don't know how to explain this. They sort of made the exit a little tighter now, which they never did before. So it's like they really were trying to prevent people from getting into the exit, and the security lines were jam-packed. And then we start walking down the hallway, and we see more people than ever. I'm not kidding. It was lines of lines. They weren't moving. It was like, what's going on here, Vester? We just exited, and now there's lines all over the place. This is terrible. What are we gonna do?
Well, here's the thing. For example, when we walked out past them, we see people going in through the walk-in checkpoint. We're fine. Then we suddenly see this line form behind where people are walking, and one line goes straight into a hotel coffee shop, and there's a line going in and out of it at the same time. We're like, that's odd. Then we walk down the ramp. There's another line coming off of that line coming out. They're going back towards the area where the cafeteria is at. We're like, what the heck is going on? And then we thought, oh my God, is this a line to get in? But it didn't make sense because when me and Ramses exited, there was just a steady line of people moving through. Where are these lines going to?
Where did all these lines come from, and why are they so long, and why is it taking so long to go through the security? Well, me and Vesh are like, well, that does it. We're going to miss every single panel now. We're trapped. Oh, well, let's put our stuff in the truck and deal with it. So we put our stuff in the truck. We're both bummed, well, this sucks. So I'm like, all right, we might as well wait on the line. And I get on the line right near the garage, which is very weird in itself because the garage is all the way on the other side of the building. I'm not kidding.
And by the way, folks, I only took one picture of this. There's people upon people in this line right here.
So I'm like, all right, Vesper, I'm going to wait on it. There's nothing we could do. And there was a woman in front of me and said, yeah, this is the line. I guess we're all trapped here together.
But Vesper being Vesper and the star of the show said, screw this, I'm going to use my star power. So I got out of line, walked all across the convention center, back towards the entrance where you walk through the security gates. And I noticed something immediately. And that's the fact that we had an Ouroboros going on. There was line that we saw that was packing up was making a giant circle leading to nowhere. It was literally the back half had a line going to nowhere. So I called Ramses and I go, Ramses, what the heck is going on here? Get your butt up here now because I don't want those people to figure out and come crashing in there and cause something.
So I literally ran through the whole entire complex and the lines were still crazy, but Vesper was right. The lines didn't do anything because when he got past the second crazy long line near the hotel coffee place, there was nothing. It was clear. Everyone just walked right in. I'm like, how is this even possible? So it was circles going around in circles. Either someone started this as a prank or people didn't realize what was going on. I don't know what the explanation is.
Actually, I do have an explanation. The event staff just stopped at the security checkpoint to have anybody in the back directing people because that's exactly what happened. all they say is, please walk up here to the security checkpoint. There's no lines.
Right, so now this is where their 5-star rating is done. I'm like, Vesper, I'm ready to rant, and now we're at that point of the review where Ramsis is gonna rant, because I'm not happy with how they ran this here. So I was like, Vesper, we could have waited on that line not knowing. We could have been stuck there if you weren't adventurous enough to say what is going on here. We walk right in, but it's not even that, wow, I'm glad we got in. It's not fair to the hundreds, and I'm not kidding, it's hundreds of people who are trapped on these ridiculous nowhere lines out there, and you have all these volunteers doing absolutely nothing. We saw one of you once with a megaphone saying something, and that's really the only time I ever saw these volunteers do anything. You have crazy lines out there, and no one is doing anything to corral these people properly to get them into this convention hall. It is not right, and it's stupid, all right? You're so worried about security, which is fine. The security is a simple process. Well, get these people through the security. There's no reason why there's circles everywhere, and we could have been trapped. We went to our car to put stuff away. We could have been trapped on some of these nonsense lines because you don't have good organization here. Inexcusable. And there you go. There goes your perfect rating, because that is as badly run as you can do. That is disgusting what went on here.
You know how to bring somebody's ultimate high, which we had from Friday, down to an ultimate low? Think that we're stuck for 2 hours and we're going to miss multiple panels that we wanted to see. That's how you lose ratings, and that's how you build up resentment.
All these snarky people who are laughing at Vesper for leaving. Well, who knows how long these snarky people are trapped in the line. So yeah, if you're listening, GalaxyCon, have better volunteers. Pay some people to run this thing. All right, even in the main hall itself, you have ridiculously long registration line. There has to be some way you can improve this. It seems like something is not working here with the organization of this process here. You got to do better here. This Saturday became a real disaster. It really did. The vendor halls were crammed. The lines were out of control. Registration was a mess. The lines outside of the entrance were going nowhere, and no one was doing anything to stop this. That could have gone on for hours. People were freaked out and panicked and worried, and you didn't care less. Hey, you're making your money every time another person goes through that door. Unexcusable. So there you go. That's my Ramsis rant.
And trust me, we understand that you really can't control the size of these crowds on Saturday. We're not asking you to control the crowds. We're asking you to direct the crowds. There is a huge difference.
But anyway, we finally got back in, but we were now running late because it took us that long to figure out how to get through all this. So 12:30 was the next panel we wanted to do, and this is called the Video Gaming Roundtable. We thought this would be interesting. You know, the choice again was Thomas Lennon or this, and I was like, well, this could be good. It has the actual Sonic voice actor, Roger Craig Smith, and that's actually a big name. He's a very well-known voice actor. That was cool. You had Eric Vale, who does a lot of Dragon Ball Z. You had Patricia Somerset, who did the Zelda voice, which is great. And then Sonny Strait, who also does Dragon Ball Z. It was in the Super Stage, which is upstairs, Super Stage, and it already started. But again, not a big crowd, because look at how many people are still trapped outside. There's so many people outside that you're not going to have a big crowd here. And I'll be honest, it wasn't A tier at all. Besides the Sonic actor, there was really nothing to get excited about. That doesn't mean it was bad, it just means it is what it is. So we had 4 cool video game voice actors, and 3 voice actors, and 1 amazing one in the Sonic guy, Roger Craig Smith, and that seemed to be the star of it. I mean, you have a Zelda actress who's not in every Zelda game, and then you have 2 minor Dragon Ball Z voice actors. Who do you think is going to be the big deal out of the 4 that are actually here?
And here's the thing. This panel could have just been the Sonic voice actor, because nobody's really adding anything. Questions that are being asked are really only being able to be answered by one of the voice actors, and that's the real problem here.
She was like, oh, so what's it like being part of a big franchise? And the Zelda voice actor was like, well, you know, it was fun playing an iconic character. And the Dragon Balls are like, oh, you know, we got to play so many characters. And then the Sonic guy talks, and he's like, yeah, blah, 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 blah. You know, it's like so much to talk about. And that's pretty much what the trend of this Q&A is going to be, because once the audience members got to ask questions, it was, oh, hey, Roger, can you tell us about working as Sonic? You know, every question became Sonic related.
We look at the time, because this is really dragging on. So we knew Hazbin Hotel was going to be big. Unfortunately, we didn't know how big, so we decided to leave 15 minutes early from that panel to get there a good 15-20 minutes before the Hazbin Hotel.
Well, it wasn't enough time, was it, Vesper?
Nope, when we got there, the entire main stage area was taken, and the ushers were going, standing room only. Look to your right, look to your left, where there's a free space, stand up. Please do not stand in between aisles.
It was just crazy, crazy. Standing room only is an understatement. Every single spot in the back of this arena was taken. Every chair was filled to the brim. Every fan was piling in. It never stopped. The whole back was filling up. Even up to the doors, there was like 20 people crowding around the exit doors to the this place. It was so packed. I've never seen a more full Q&A in any convention we ever did. This was the fullest panel we've ever experienced. And we had, okay, not seats, but positions. We had prime spots right on the back wall. It was actually, we were straight line to it. Little did we know that wasn't going to be good because it kept filling up and filling up. So then everyone started to get in front of us. And I'm like, Vesper, this is not going to work. We can't even get pictures. We can't see anything. So me and Vesper moved to the standing position right behind the very last row. And we were able to stand there. And that was the best we can get. Standing room only. We were like the first standing positions of the last row of the place.
Yeah, as we stood there, they literally filled in left and right. As long as you didn't get in front of any of the seats, they allowed you in. And here's the thing. This was entirely uncomfortable because I'm quite certain that the person I was staying behind didn't like my keep hitting the back of their chair and head because somebody's pushing me in the back.
And now it's time for another Ramsis rant because this could have been handled a little better. And I'm not saying you can handle the crowd better, but you can handle those who are uncomfortable to let them have a view of this. What they could have done was they have so much room in the main area there. Why not have a live feed of this so people outside can enjoy this and watch it more comfortably? You can have it playing on a big screen in the hallway there, and everyone who can't get in can at least watch it. I mean, that would have made more sense to me. They should have limited how many people can get in here. Once every seat's filled, and once you have like 50 people standing there, then that's it. You got to close the doors and say, we've reached our maximum. No, they didn't care less. Hey, if you want to stand there and be on top of everyone and be uncomfortable, we don't care. Hey, we told you that you can get to the Q&A and that you won't be able to hear. Hey, that's fine. I think that's disgusting. Again, it's not right. Yet there are things you can do to make this work. Have it available outside on a big screen. You're already filming it and you're already recording it, and it's very clearly on the big screen. Show that big screen feed elsewhere, and they would make a lot of people happy who are standing at the doorways trying to peek in to see a dot on the stage that's like a mile away. That's ridiculous. That is ridiculous.
That being said, to go along with this, you may also want to put out a video for first-time convention goers so they understand to get to the panels early. If we hadn't gotten there early, there's no way we could have even gotten into the door.
Me and Vesper both knew going in that Hazbin Hotel was going to be the most popular Q&A, and we were right. We knew. Now, there's a little caveat here. I'm ranting and raving. I'm not even really that big a fan of Hazbin Hotel. I already made that clear in our Huntington review that I don't love their style of stuff. I don't even love Hell of a Boss. I've seen all the episodes of Hazbin Hotel, so I was familiar with the show. So I was like, all right, well, at least I'll be able to understand what they're talking about because I've seen every episode. But that doesn't mean I love it. I wasn't like, oh my god, this is the greatest thing ever. I was like, well, this will be interesting. Let's see what happens. Lo and behold, not one of our favorite commentators, but not one of our least favorite. This is like a middle-of-the-road guy.
Yes, this is Milo Beasley. How in the heck did this guy get in charge of the biggest panel ever held at GalaxyCon in Columbus? However, he did do something right this time, which surprised both me and Ramses. He introduced all of these guests, got a standing ovation, then said, let's go straight to questions. And that's smart because it's hard to see here. This just looks like a random bunch of people standing here trying to find a place to watch. No, that's the question line.
There must have been 100 people on this line, and there was no way they were getting through all these people. It was crazy. So yes, even the bees knew to get right to it, and they did.
Please help me welcome out the cast of Hazbin Hotel.
Feels like a deposition. What's up, nerds?
And this is where I sort of lost interest in it. And, you know, some panels, the questions by the fans improve the panel. I think this is the exact opposite effect. All you have is Generation Zers who are gushing and who are fanboys and girls who love everything these people have done, and they want to give their 2-minute speeches about how much they love them, how much they mean to them, and now they've helped them with their depression and how they've gotten them over times and their whole life story, and then they ask a ridiculous question.
Yes, I really didn't get to film too much because the introduction took too long and there were so many people talking and screaming you couldn't hardly hear anything from the back of the crowds. But here's the thing, if you want an idea of what type of questions they asked, just like Ramsey said, you can look at our Huntington Comic and Toy Convention where they interviewed the Hell of a Boss cast. And it's the same type of questions, like you said. Who you're going to ship? If you could voice another character, who Who would you voice? Oh, thank you so much. Oh yeah, what's going to happen in the next season?
It was the same exact questions. It was like, oh wow, we having a deja vu here. You have thousands of people here, and you still get the same exact questions and people gushing over these people and asking the same exact nonsense. So me and Bess were like, you know something, we can really dip out of this. I mean, I know it's crazy. You guys are probably laughing. You're walking out of the Hazbin Hotel Q A, which is like the biggest of the big panels here, but we're like, we could squeeze another one in. Nick Castle has been going on for about 20 minutes already at this point. So we're like, hey, why not? Let's just get out of here.
And by the way, folks, we left at about the 30-minute mark, and 3 questions were asked.
And I want to make it clear, because Ramses is always honest and goes straight with you guys. The Hell of a Boss voice actors were fine. They were on target. They were happy to be here. They had the energy. They were into it.
They were also a little raunchy.
But they warned us. It actually says MA suggested. So this time, unlike Huntington, where they didn't warn you, they warn you that it's going to be mature, adults only, lots of cursing. It was just the same nonsense. Them cursing nonstop, them laughing, them trying to be funny, the crowd eating up every single word they say. They could say boo and the crowd went crazy. I mean, that's how ridiculous it is. It was like the Beatles here. I mean,
but the biggest problem is that most of the voice actors, except for like 3 or 4, were pretty silent unless one of the people on stage actually asked them something, because you were obviously seeing who was the favorite characters in the show awful quick, and it was, in my opinion, taking away from it. But I will congratulate the moderator here, Milo Beasley. Did right. You saw the line. You said just start asking questions, and thank you for that, because as we're going to see quite soon, we have some moderators who can't figure that out.
So we walked out after about a half hour's worth of it. We got our taste of it, and then we headed to something that was not exciting and not packed and not crazy. Nick Castle in the hero stage.
Now, Nick Castle actually has a big background. He did Last Starfighter. He was in the original Halloween movies, and he actually had a lot of stories. Yes, he's older, but he was up on stage and he was just giving it all. But here's the point where we finally started to realize the moderators are going to play a big part in this. When we got there, Kid Cadet was asking questions and going, yes, so what about this? What about that? Giving him 3-word questions, and there's a line of people waiting to ask questions, and she did not acknowledge them until almost the end of the panel. And me and Ramses were like, oh my god, this is so dry. He wasn't bad, it was just not interesting.
Is there a classic film, or maybe just a film in general, that you feel like maybe flies under the radar a little bit, that you think more people should like study or research?
Well, you know, I have a kind of real eclectic taste in terms of the history of film, but, you know, some of my favorite films are, there's a French film called Rules of the Game by Jean Renoir, and if you're a filmmaker, you have to see that. It's just an amazing film. Then there's things that I just have personal fondness for. My dad was a choreographer in movie musicals, so I love movie musicals, and I love Meet Me in St. Louis, for instance, with Judy Garland. One of my favorite comedies is The Awful Truth with Irene Dunn and Cary Grant. That genre, those 30s and 40s comedies, screwball comedies, are some of the best for understanding timing and humor and just the facility for how to make a good film. So those are 3 I would.
The trolley song, is that from me?
Yeah, that's from St. Louis.
So good.
And then the last 10 minutes, she's like, let's go to questions. Like, thank God.
Wow, they put us out of our misery here. So, and they were not meshing at all well here. She was trying, she was struggling, her questions were flat, and they gave him nothing to work with. The audience was falling asleep. It was very bad, unfortunately. We went from the most exciting panel in the world to the most disappointing panel in the world.
It actually got interesting because the fans were asking questions you wanted to hear, just saying.
Like, oh, what's it like to have William Shatner as the face that you have there? Or, oh, what'd you think of the sequels?
And they asked Last Starfighter questions about Robert Preston, how that was his last film. And it was amazing. And we're like, we only got 10 minutes of this. This is what this panel should have been.
Yeah, this was all due to commentators. She didn't read the room and say, you know, I'm floundering here, I better throw it to the audience. She floundered with a subject she had no idea what she was talking about, and you have a lot of people who were very interested in asking questions. To her credit, though, she did get through all the questions because she did go to overtime. She let every single question ask, and at least that was a satisfying way to end this panel.
But to be fair, she waited till the last 10 minutes of this panel because me and Ramsey stood to the very end. These questions were excellent, but they didn't have enough time to ask them, and shame on you, moderators.
Yes, so that ended that one, and as you can see, that's so far the most disappointing. And not to Nick Castle's credit, he didn't have much to work with. But anyway, we decided we're going to head back to the main stage, because that's where we're going to be for the rest of the day. That's really it. We are now destined to be trapped in the main room for the rest of the event here on Saturday. And now due to having to be strategic, because it is so crowded and so crazy, once you get out of there, you're going to lose your seat. You're not going to be able to get back in there. So we got in for George Takei, who was going to be at 2:15. And George Takei was on Star Trek as Sooooo. He was the helmsman on the main bridge, and then he became very big in the movies. So the movies is really where he became bigger. But he was always on the TV show. So yeah, we're like, hey, this is exciting. We always do William Shatner. It's kind of cool that now we get to do George Takei. George Takei and William Shatner hate each other. And I mean hate each other. They will not even appear at a convention together, and that's why William Shatner's not here. George Takei is here. They don't want to see each other. They don't want to associate with each other. So we're like, all right, good. Now we're going to get to see how George Takei does at a convention.
Please welcome Mr. George Takei.
Thank you for that welcome. I'm so happy to be in Columbus, Ohio. It's been a few decades ago that I first came here, and then I was running marathons, and you have to maintain yourselves, and you have a wonderful river running right through your city with a running path along it. So I have great memories of running in the morning, first thing before the convention, 2 of them. And then a decade ago, I was asked to come here to be the Grand Marshal of the Pride Parade, riding with me and my husband Brad on that float were 2 other heroes of the LGBTQ movement. Stephen Snyder Hill and his hubby Joshua. Stephen was in the closet and still served in the U.S. military heroically. And I think it's doubly heroically, having been such a great soldier for the United States.
And boy, can you see there that this is kind of dry.
Yeah, it kind of is an understatement. We were a little disappointed. After Nick Castle, I was like, it can only go up from here. This is George freaking Takei. I mean, he's going to have some great stories. He's going to talk about his day's work, and he's going to talk about the movies. And now we have Patty as the moderator, and we're going to give a little review of Patty later, because he gets better and he gets worse.
But he was not good for this.
He was not on his A game here. Now, Patty gushing over George Takei, because George Takei is a freedom fighter. So Patty, again, was gushing here, and he was letting George Takei just have at it. George Takei was talking about all the stuff he did for gay rights and all the stuff he did for pride parades and how he came out of the closet as the biggest deal. He was trying to get his husband out there. The guy wanted no part of it, which was funny. His husband Brad was like, nope, I'm not available. I mean, it was just very silly. It was like, what are we doing here? All right, we know you're a great freedom fighter. We know how much you've done, but you know, you've wasted now 15 minutes talking about how great you are without really talking about anything at all. So Patty was loving this.
But he also didn't immediately turn it over to the huge line of fans. He did start it sooner than Kid Cadet, but he definitely needed more time because he got through like 3 questions.
And they were horrible, and we'll get to them in a second. So Patty has this weird routine he does, and I think it's silly. So he gives out candy to the people online, and he'll always give 2 pieces of candy to the first person. What I like about Patty is he actually goes to the audience, and I think it's great. He does it Donahue style, and this is a very dated reference, but you guys should know who Donahue is if you're listening to our show. Patty would go to the people in the line, hold the microphone, and say, what's your question? So we're like, all right, well, now with questions, things should get a little better. Boy, were we wrong, because the questions are just going to follow up on everything that he pretty much already talked about himself and being the freedom fighter and gay rights. It's pretty much every of the 3 questions has somehow related to poor George Takei here and what he had to deal with in his life.
Especially being sent to basically an internment camp for Japanese citizens during World War II. And don't get me wrong, everything he said is very pertinent. I actually encourage you to read his book about what happened to him and his family there. It's that important. But this is a PopCon, and I felt terrible about this, and I'm like, I don't want to come here and feel terrible about this. I want to hear you talk about all the fun things you did. I have enough worries and problems in my life. Not to the level of being sent to an internment camp, but to each person, we have our own trials and tribulations, and I applaud you, George George Takei, for overcoming yours, and I'm very proud of you for doing that. But you literally brought most of us down with your story.
It was not a big crowd at all here, because compared to Hazbin Hotel, it was like half the seats were filled and that was it. Everyone pretty much booked out of there when George Takei came in. But the people that stayed were very big believers and followers of what George Takei was preaching, and that's fine. But you're just giving him lollipop questions to follow up on everything he keeps talking about. It's like, can't we hear about what it was like in Star Trek 6? Can't we hear about his favorite moment in the original series? Can't we hear about anything else but depressing stories? So finally he finished with that, and we're like, all right, good. He's going to move on to the next question. So the next question is not better. It's actually about a TV show, but it's another poor George question, because it's like, can you talk about your feelings of them banning the one episode of Twilight Zone that you did? It's called The Encounter. It was a season 5 episode in the 1960s, and this was during the whole civil rights movement. It originally broadcast on May 1st, 1964, and it was never shown again until 2016, when Sci-Fi Channel decided they're going to show it, and who cares what people say, and then it's been shown ever since. This episode was seen as very risky because Japanese American groups saw it as bringing fear again, because the whole idea of this is a veteran and a gardener meet up in the attic, and a cursed sword that was used to kill a Japanese soldier way back when has been following this veteran around, and the sword promises will have revenge on this guy, and now it becomes the Japanese gardener and this veteran are fighting in real life, and it's due to the sword, and pretty much the sword does take both of their lives in a vengeful thing. So it was seen as like really negative connotation of Japanese Americans due to the way that the Japanese gardener is being aggressive and wanting revenge, and it's, oh no, here we go again. So they banned the episode outright, and George Takei is talking about, again, what happened to the Japanese during the World War and how horrible it was, and yes, they didn't show my episode for a long time. He called him Bill. They showed Bill's episode and not mine, and he was like really upset about that.
To his credit, George Takei did not burst into flames by mentioning Will Shatner's name.
To George Takei, credit said it didn't make sense to him to ban this episode because you realize Twilight Zone is not a factual show. It is a fantasy show having fun with real events and then putting twists on them. That's what the Twilight Zone is supposed to be. He didn't get, like, why are we banning something that's known to be a work of fiction? It is not real. There's no sword controlling anybody. So it didn't make sense to him. So he was honest on that. But it became poor George Takei again because he talks about the camps and what the Japanese people had to go through and how horrible, and he gets it. And that was the second question here. So now we're like with 5 minutes left and we have one more question.
And the point being is that George Takei was just very dry. Problem is his age was showing and it took him a little time to answer.
Yeah, you can see like the gears were turning in his head as he's trying to think. He was stuttering and struggling a lot to come with the answer, and that's due to age. It wasn't anything else, just his age was getting the best of him.
In all honesty, Will Shatner, or I should say Bill Shatner, last year spent 10 minutes talking about how he defeated his cell phone, and it was still better and more entertaining than anything George Takei talked about.
Yeah, it's very sad because I really was looking forward to George Takei. I really was. Like, they advertised it as, come have a Q&A with the star of Star Trek. Well, you wouldn't know this guy's in Star Trek because it didn't at all come up one time. So what a disappointing panel. Me and Bess were like, wow, that kind of sucked. And the crowd didn't leave with a standing ovation. It was kind of like, all right, that's over with. We have to stay now in this arena, the main stage, because now all of our events are going to take place here. So we moved up to a better seat, and now it was supposed to be John Cleese. And if you don't know who John Cleese is, he's a star of Monty Python, a lot of British shows, as well as James Bond. That's right.
But he's most remembered now by this current generation as Nearly Headless Nick.
Yes, so he was going to be big, and we were so looking forward to John Cleese. He canceled. We don't know the reason, but they were able to get a replacement very quickly, and it's an even bigger star, so this is cool. They replaced John Cleese with Kiefer Sutherland. 24 and the Lost Boys are pretty much his big to do. So yeah, Kiefer Sutherland, we were like, all right, that's good. Yeah, this is going to be great. So now we have Patty again.
And we're going, oh God, Patty, please don't pull what she did at George Takei. Because, I mean, he really was swooning over George Takei and would have probably groveled before his feet the way he was doing things.
In Patty's defense, he totally changed his personality now that he had Kiefer Sutherland instead of George Takei. He became very good moderator. He was very neutral. He was allowing, everyone to have their say. It was really very different.
Even me and Ramses were talking about while we're going, holy crap, Patty's changed. He warmed up Kiefer Sutherland, although he did talk to him for a bit longer than he probably should have, because there was a much larger line waiting to ask Kiefer Sutherland questions as opposed to George Takei.
Patty pulled the, let's talk about some of your obscure stuff that nobody cares about. Definitely did that. He asked about some stuff that's like, I don't even know what they're talking about, whatever. It was like 15 to 20 minutes of him asking nonsense.
First thing I'd love to start off with is one of the best episodes ever of all time of Amazing Stories, The Mission. directed by Steven Spielberg. That's the one where they're in the World War II bomber plane. And
I moved to the United States from Canada when I was about 16 years old. I did a couple plays in New York, then moved to Los Angeles, and the first person I was hired by was Steven Spielberg. And if you realize that it takes about anywhere from 18 months to a year from the beginning of a project to when it actually finally comes out, the next few films that I did were really just because Steven Spielberg had hired me. So when you take a look at Stand By Me and Lost Boys, those films I got just because arguably the most successful director in the world had given me a job.
And unfortunately, Kiefer Sutherland did not bring his A energy. And I know this is probably Kiefer Sutherland himself. I think he's a more reserved guy. He's not a shouter. He's not a laugher. He's just a very professional, by the book, I'm a good actor type of guy. And that's how it was coming off. Very well spoken. He had good answers and he was getting to the point, but he was not like, I'm excited to be here. This is great. Yeah.
He did play to the crowd a little bit, but it actually surprised us because he had about the same level and seriousness as George Takei did. He was very serious about his answers, and with only a few one-liners, that was the only thing that really saved his panel, because it's like, that's wonderful. I love to hear what you have to say.
That's how this panel is going to go. And we're like, wow, hopefully the fans can save this, because it's not bad. I'm enjoying a lot more than the George Takei, because he's teaching you a lot. You're learning a lot about 24 and his involvement on it. Really no Lost Boy questions until we got to the crowd. So Patty's going to do his same routine again. He's going to pull out the candy, and I think Kiefer even makes a joke about that what's with the candy. So then we get to the question, and now they're pretty much asking about Lost Boys, because let's be honest, people our age, that's the movie we're interested in, Lost Boys. And it was a lot of interesting questions like, oh, would this vampire group meet the vampire group of another movie? And he's like, oh yeah, they would destroy him. And then Patty's like showing the picture behind him. Kiefer Sutherland title has his Lost Boy look, so they're talking about his hair.
This is where Kiefer speaks up and goes, oh yeah, I didn't realize, but I inadvertently made mullets popular. Sorry about that.
So there you go. That was like his best line of the whole thing. So it shows he had a little personality. He was trying some 24 stuff. There was some stuff about that.
The Last Survivor was another popular one.
Yes, he was doing well with the questions, but it wasn't the most exciting panel. But he was very solid, very interesting, and he answered everything, and the fans were happy. So I guess you can't beat that.
So as our butts are sore for sitting there for 2 hours straight, I can't take anymore. I'm hungry. We really didn't have lunch. We didn't have time for it. So I went into the exhibit hall really quickly because I knew where the snack vendor was. And holy crap, for like an Oreo, 3 marshmallows, and 2 pretzel sticks, it was $12.
That is crazy. I will say though, Vesper got me the chocolate covered pretzel. It was delicious. It was really, really good. Not worth that price, no, but it really did hit the spot and it helped us to get through the rest of the day. So it was definitely needed. So Kiefer Sutherland leaves, and then a smaller crowd now, because this is an even lesser star, but don't let that fool you. This is going to be actually a very exciting panel. It's Danny Trejo, who stars in Machete, Breaking Bad, and all those other movies where you need a Mexican bad guy as one of the thugs in the background. That's Danny Trejo right there.
And he was also in Spy Kids. That's why a lot of people remember him
there was
from.
a lot of Spy Kid questions, and I remember him from Spy Kids.
He was also in like the Two-Headed Shark as a cameo. This man has done everything, and we thought that Kiefer Sutherland would be like the one we enjoyed the most today, but after seeing that, I knew for a fact that Danny Trejo was going to run away as the most interesting person, because there's a lot written about him going to these things and how he actually enjoys being there and talking about anything. He don't care. He was there with his A game on from beginning to end.
So now Victor Dandridge is the host, and we're like, oh, this is great. We loved Victor Dandridge last year. We thought he was one of the best commentator moderators because he had Peter Cullen, and he did such an amazing job. We're like, wow, this is really the greatest moderator we ever saw. And we were very happy, and he had the energy. He was like, hey guys, let's hear, yes. He was getting the crowd riled up. I hope you're all having a good time. Ask any questions, blah, blah, blah. He was getting us all warmed up. It was really good. Finally, we got our favorite moderator, and we'll see if he stays that way. A little foreshadowing here. But for today, he is going to be our favorite. He's going to really warm us up.
Victor Dandridge only asked a few questions, and you can see this is going to be one of those panels. As in, oh my god, I hope this doesn't end, because quite literally, there was not enough time listening to Danny Trejo.
Now, it started with a little more foreshadowing. What would happen is Danny would be talking and his voice would keep fading out, and then Victor's like, oh, use my microphone, and that did not solve the problem. The problem was Danny Trejo is not used to doing these like long interviews, so he keeps moving his arm around and the microphone keeps moving away from his face. So you'll hear him talking in a sentence and then his voice will fade out suddenly because he's holding the microphone in a ridiculous position. And this is going to be the downside to this panel because he's like talking about a very interesting story and then you lose the ending of it because he moved the microphone away from his face.
But to be fair, some of his stories you could hear without the microphone because Danny Trejo did not hold back. He talks about helping people, being a counselor, all this, but he doesn't do it as a way to prop himself up. And he even talked about some of his ego getting in his way with the stores where he did the voice and goes, my babies, and then he actually helped out a wreck, and the one's going, my baby, he's thinking, you saw my movie?
Oh, they want my autograph, they're quoting my movie, and he runs over to them, and they're like, what are you talking about? My baby, and then he really had to help with the baby, because he's like, oh, whoops.
But the thing was, Danny Trejo was a person that you could relate to. And me and Ramses get tired of the Delancey. Oh, it's all about the work. Well, when he's talking all about the work, he really means it. He's even said, I'd rather do like 4 movies to your 1 movie as a star.
And he said there's nothing wrong with being typecast, and we've heard this before from other actors. Typecast means you're working. He didn't say in that many words, but that's pretty much what he was insinuating. The phone is always ringing. They always need him for something, and he always has work. He just finished narrating like a History Channel show.
Yeah, that's the important thing to tell you. This is why Danny Trejo just stole Saturday. Is because he was literally filming for the History Channel and flew in last night, got there for that day.
Sir, you had a show premiere just yesterday. How are you here at the same time? It was on the History Channel, and now you're here.
Magic of television.
Okay. I love it. Tell us about this show. I think we all need to know about this.
I think history was probably the only class I ever passed. I got 8 episodes, Fridays at 10, and it's really interesting. You know, people like finding treasures in their backyard.
Oh, snap!
Yeah, it's like this lady was digging, petunias, so I don't know, and she dug a Roman temple.
Just in her backyard?
Yeah, and they uncovered a warship from the Revolutionary War.
Wait, it was just there? Like, just ships that, okay.
Underneath the ground.
Listen.
But that stopped production on, and the same thing again in Austin, Texas. They were digging and they found a woolly mammoth or a saber something, and all of a sudden everybody was out of job.
You can't build this house here. I'm sorry. This is now sacred space.
And he was very humble, and I like to see that in him. He was like, oh, this is the most amazing thing to happen. It's like a dream come true. I thank God every single day for this, and I never wanted to stop, and I always wonder if it's going to stop, and it doesn't, and I'm so appreciative. And the fans like you make this all worth it. It was such an amazing thing.
Yeah, and it was sort of reminiscent of the Hazbin Hotel, because they were all saying that, and when you know that you're an internet sensation, you know that your time is short, and they are thankful for it, and I truly believe that of the voice actors there, just like I believe it with Danny Trejo.
But his time's not short. He's been doing this now for 30 years at least. I mean,
oh yeah, he kept referencing all these things, all he's done.
Spy Kids, he brought up a lot, and a lot of the fans were really into the Spy Kids and Machete. Those were the 2 big deals that everyone kept bringing up.
And he had fun stories, but the way he talked, he just talked like he was one of us.
Except he kept losing his voice because the microphone kept moving away, and I wish Victor handled that a little better. That was something Victor should have been, hey man, they can't hear you, hold it to your mouth. And that was a problem. So when the questions started from the crowd, they were all into it. Every question was great, everything you could think of, and every single time Danny fully answered everything. It was so heartfelt, it was so impassionate. He didn't just give like 1-word answers, and he was funny because he was so honest, and that's why this panel went so well. The crowd was eating this up every moment it went. So it was great, Vesper. I think that was definitely one of the best, and you had a feeling it was going to be good, so you knew that Danny was going to turn out.
Well, the thing is I've seen him in so many movies, and a lot of these movies review channels I've watched about him were like, if you go see him at a con, you will not be disappointed because he comes in, he's there to enjoy it, and he does enjoy it. He was just so animated that he couldn't keep the microphone next to him.
The crowd was like standing ovation. It was great, cheering. No one wanted it to end because that's how much fun it was. And then, alas, it did end. But we have to stay here still because we have 2 more panels to do here in this main room. Oh, no.
And while we're sitting here waiting for our next panel, I was actually talking to Ramses about just how much better that was with Victor there. That moderator took a great person, Danny Trejo, and actually lifted him up because he knew how to play to the crowd. He warmed him up. He didn't keep him for himself, which is my biggest pet peeve. I hate it when they go in and say, oh, I'm going to indulge myself like Joe Jr. did, which really pissed me off, and it really didn't do anything for Ramses either.
No, I hate that too. That's one of my pet peeves also. But I think some of the moderators forget that we're not here to watch them gush and be I'm indulging and wow, what an opportunity. We're here to enjoy the event and meet celebrities that we rarely get to see, and we paid our ticket to get here, so we want the chance to. And now we're very excited because we think that this might be the best Q&A of the day. We knew Danny was great, but we think the guy that's coming up next at 5:15 is going to be the best thing. We can't wait. This is going to be so exciting. So it's Ernie Hudson. Yes, Winston from the Ghostbusters, and it's the Inglorious Trexters again hosting this because they do the same intro they did to the Zach Galligan panel where they give their little plug to their show and then they start showing Ghostbuster clips. So it wasn't the trailers this time, they were showing all of Winston's very famous quotes. They're playing this for like 5 minutes and then 3, not 2, but all 3 of them walk out. If you remember from last year, there's one of them I hated, telling all the dad jokes. He wasn't funny, he was annoying, and unfortunately he's part of this panel, and he's going to be just as annoying and stupid again, but that's we'll get to that in a bit.
First things first, if you don't know, Ernie Hudson is extremely reserved. You can see with Winston Zeddemore that he only got excited like twice in the original 2 movies, Ghostbusters 1 and 2. When I talked to him in person, he was reserved, but he was lighthearted and liked to talk about, like I said, Leviathan a little bit. It was wonderful, and we thought originally this guy's going to run away with it. But after Danny Trejo, I didn't think that Ernie Hudson would be able to do it because Danny Trejo was just excited to be there. When Ernie comes out on stage, very reserved, comes down, he sits down, he looks perfect. He looked almost exactly like how Kiefer Sutherland just sat down, took his place, took his pose, and just talked quietly. And just like Kiefer, he just had a bunch of one-liners. But he had some very interesting stories. You know how we've been emphasizing how moderators can set the mood? Well, they come out, and the first thing that comes out of the Inglorious Trexter's mouth is, oh, let me indulge myself.
Well, you've had such a great career. I mean, you've done iconic movies, you've done a ton of television, you've done guest spots on, every significant TV show. But you started out as a playwright, and I wonder how the transition for you, what was it, when did the acting bug sort of bite you? How did you make that switch from wanting to be a writer and theater to wanting to act?
I joined a couple of local theater groups, Concept East Theater. It was community theater, so if you were part of the company, any given night, the actor might not show up, and so you had to step on stage and play his part, or the guy running the lights didn't show up, and so you kind of had to do everything. So acting was something I did on the side. I got a scholarship after Wayne State to go to Yale in the playwriting program, and somehow writing became hard. And when I went to Hollywood trying to get started as a writer, it was very difficult, and I needed a job. Acting is immediate. So if I went on an audition and I got the job, I got paid. Even if they decided not to do it, they'd still have to pay you. Whereas with writing, it could go on a year and a half, and still you haven't made any money.
You're like, uh-oh. And it wasn't uh-oh. The guy asked the most ridiculous question about a moment that he barely even remembered. But then that led to another story about how he met Ivan Reitman in an elevator. And I was like, oh, hey, because that was like the first movie he worked on with Ivan Reitman. So that was all building the connection. So what the Trexters do, and they did this with the Dax Actors last year, they did the same thing that they were trying to do with Ernie, starting from the beginning of his career, working it up, finally working their way into what they were well known for. So they were being cutesy here. But with Ernie Hudson, it's not working because Ernie Hudson is not as big an actor. She was a very big TV actress, but he's not a very big movie actor. He's known for Ghostbusters and very minor roles and everything else, which I have no problem with. Ernie Hudson's one of my favorites. I'm not going to badmouth him. I love Ernie Hudson. I got his autograph for crying out loud. So they were going about it wrong. The crowd was here to hear about Ghostbusters, but Ernie sort of led it there himself. Ernie was only seen as the tough, rugged, I have a deep voice type guy to Ivan Reitman, so Ivan didn't really consider him for Ghostbusters until he had no choice. All the actors he wanted wanted to play this part weren't available. So then it's like, oh, well, there's always Ernie Hudson. We'll give him a try. But Ernie had to keep trying out and proving himself until finally they allowed him to have the Winston role. So that was the interesting story that he told. But that was in spite of the Trexters. The Trexters didn't ask him that. He worked his way into answering that question.
And that was the problem. They took up way too much time, and they made Ernie freaking Hudson boring. Until the questions came.
And it took a very long time to get there. They were like, let's talk about Ghostbusters, and it wasn't really much. Let's talk about Ghostbusters 2, and even that talk was kind of weird. It was like, oh, well, you know, when you do a sequel, you don't know what to expect, but they always expect, oh, don't worry, Ernie will always be available, so don't worry about it. And he was, which is the joke, and he was always making jokes about how he needs money, and he's always available, and he's the easy guy to get.
Oh, and by the way, they're not lying, as we told you before, about how everything was perfectly priced at his booth.
Yes, for however many per word was his price. Yeah, it worked to that, and then it worked to the new movies that he did with the new Ghostbusters, and he really didn't answer much. It was very weird. Ghostbusters 2, Afterlife, and then the Frozen Empire, he really didn't talk much about it. It was very strange. So we're wasting like 25 minutes of really absolutely nothing, and then finally the audience gets to ask questions after the Trexters so miraculously finally decided, okay, we've had our fill, you guys can have questions.
So after Ernie's monotone replies, he finally gets questions, and you can see this man has emotions finally. He nearly choked up into tears at the last question he received. And we're like, I want to see more of this. And then it's like, oh, time's up.
Time is up. Yeah, so it really was not a very good panel. And that's mostly due to the Trexters. They weren't leading a very good show here. I was surprised they used the Trexters. Now, they used 2 of the Trexters for Galligan, and it worked well. They used all 3 Trexters for Ernie, and it did not work well. So maybe less is better than more. I don't know. But the one guy I hated, he was just dropping balls and anchors and duds the whole way through. He really was putting things to a standstill.
They were there to talk to Ernie Hudson, not us. Big pet peeve. Hate it when these do it. Joe Jr. does it. Inglorious Trexters does it. And I've lost so much respect for them.
Yeah, they didn't run a good show here at all.
And unfortunately, Ernie Hudson is not nearly half the man that Jim Shooter is.
And a lot of Ernie Hudson was, woe is me too. You know, I'm in 2 of the biggest movies ever and I can't get a job. You know, woe is me. And, you know, he's not suffering. He's not poor. He has millions of dollars in the bank. Good for him. He's earned every single dollar and more, but he's not suffering. It's not like, wow, poor Ernie, he has to beg for his next meal here. No, he's doing fine. So it was a little weird with the Ernie, like, woe is me. Yes, he's not a big star, but how many people become huge, gigantic Brad Pitt stars in Hollywood? There's very few people that are Arnold and Sylvester and Brad and Clooney. I mean, how many people become that? Not many. So Ernie was in 2 of the biggest movies ever. He's iconic. People love him. He had a lot of fans. He had a huge line at his autograph table. Be happy, but it just was a little depressive. He was always like self-decriminating in a joking way. Yes, in a joking way, but it was a little weird that he wasn't more appreciative of how big an impact he had on so many people by being the Winston character for so many years.
I don't know. I mean, did these guys actually rub Ernie wrong? It's very possible because, I mean, what we saw at the booth and what we experienced in the auditorium were 2 different Ernies.
You have to remember, he's in his 70s now too. This has been 40 years since he was in Ghostbusters 1. This is a very long time. He's a lot older now. His memory's not the best. He didn't remember most of the things people were bringing up. Even when Vesper brought up his Leviathan story that he already mentioned, Ernie didn't remember that either. So you have to remember, there's a long time has passed, and you're asking him some very specific questions. And he had a funny story about that. We'll end that with this. Someone said, you were in that movie. And he's like, no, I wasn't. He's like, yeah, you were in that movie. He's like, no, I'm telling you right now, I wasn't. And then the guy shows him a clip of him in that movie. He's like, oh, well, I guess I was in that movie. So it showed that he didn't remember everything he did. And that was also another problem. We thought this was going to be the most exciting Ghostbuster discussion ever. And it was barely that. The audience members asking questions sort of revived this, but that was the only saving grace. So now Ernie leaves, and we're like, well, this has been a little disappointing, Vester. You know, we're both sitting there, and the crowd is dissipating again. Now, the next guest is sort of a mixed bag. She's going to be a controversial, quote-unquote, guest here, and we'll tell you why when we tell you who it is. And it's not a large crowd. We're now at 6 o'clock, so we're getting to the later part of the event here, and there's really nothing competing with it, so she's sort of the last, like, big Q&A they have, but they also had an AEW event that was going on later, so I think that was going to be the big deal of the night. So this is going to be the last hurrah for me investors. It's going to be Gina Carano next, and this can go either way. This could either be very cool if they let her be herself, or it could be very restrictive if they're going to hold it back. Patty's the moderator, and he's actually fanboying over her, and I was surprised because they are polar opposites. She's very right-leaning, he's very left-leaning, and he admitted this. I'm a very big fan of hers. I'm sorry she left the show. Like, he said all this before she even came out there, and he wants everyone to be very excited about this. He's going to really open it up to everybody. So this is where I was like, wow, Patty's really learned. I was like, last year, you know, he wasn't like this. When he had Dreyfuss, he was very upset that Dreyfuss was giving his opinions on things that disagree with Patty. He was gushing over Jodie Whittaker, like, yeah, you're the greatest. So he's changed, and we saw that because in the previous panel we saw with Kiefer, he was actually opening up a little bit. So we were like, all right, let's see how he's going to be with Gina, and he was actually good. I'm going to actually give you praise, Patty. You were wonderful as the moderator to Gina, because you let Gina be Gina. You didn't restrict anything. You weren't upset about anything. You were supportive of her the whole entire. I don't know if this is an act or not, and if it was, so be it. That's your job. But you really handled yourself very well. As the story goes, Gina Carano has had a huge beef with Disney. Disney got rid of her on The Mandalorian because she had opinions that didn't agree with Disney's left-leaning views. She had a more right-leaning view, and they said, well, if that's how you're going to be, we're going to get rid of you. And just like that, they fired her. And long story short, now there's a huge case, Gina versus Disney. And that's pretty much the sum of the whole story that you need to know. So she's very upset. She's very bitter at the whole thing. So I was like, gee, are they really going to let her open up? And the answer is yes, they are going to let her say exactly what she wants to say.
Yeah, so here is a little clip of Gina talking to us.
How did you, in that first career, what drew you into martial arts?
What drew me into martial arts was walking into, well, we were living kind of like a rough lifestyle of, you know, just the rough lifestyle that you hit around 19 or sometimes earlier. It goes into your 21s. I don't know if anybody knows about that style. But I started losing friends to that lifestyle. And then Kevin Ross, he lost his best friend to a heart condition early. Before he lost his best friend said, don't waste your life because I don't get to live mine. So what do you want to do with your life, Kevin? And Kevin said, I want to fight. I want to do Muay Thai. So Kevin walked in. He was the first love of my life and the last love of my life. So we're together now. We took a decade off, and that was, you know, but we came back around. And so he went in to live his dream. And then I went in. It took me months later, but I followed him in and I started doing Muay Thai. And the first thing that Master Chan said to me was like, "Oh, baby, you're fat. You need to lose weight." And I was like, "Okay, it's time to get back in the gym." And I was like, "All right." And then my fight career just took off.
Now, here's the problem, as you saw there. Gina, good actress, wonderful person, but she was so soft-spoken and boring. Patty, I'm going to give you a 1-up. You were more interesting than Gina Carano.
I didn't watch Mandalorian. I'm not into Star Wars. I'm a retro guy. I'm not into the new stuff. But she's a great actress, I have to say. And when she was thrown off the show, fans were annoyed. Like, she was the biggest part. Like, how can you get rid of her? As an interviewer, no, she wasn't very exciting at all. She started as an MMA fighter, and she mentioned that a lot, and it shows because she doesn't have like the celebrity type of vibes here. She's not all energetic. She's not all, you know, in your face. She's very reserved, soft-spoken. But she wasn't afraid to say she hates Disney. She wasn't afraid to say how wrong it was. She wasn't afraid to say the fight has just started. I mean, she was rah, 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 I'm going after them, so good for her. And the crowd was behind her, because if the crowd wasn't behind her, you weren't going to have fans here. Why would you watch someone you weren't a fan of?
And I also want to congratulate GalaxyCon for having the courage to bring her into this, because she did some of these after she got canceled by Disney, but not a lot. And now it's becoming more and more apparent that it's okay to come and talk about, because she didn't talk as much about all of her problems as you think. She talked about only when asked a question about it, but more people were interested in her role as Cara Dune and other things that she's been doing. It was actually nice, but she was very low energy because she actually looked like she was nervous talking to all these people. She had a huge crowd, and she didn't really get into her pace and footing until the very end once again. And this was not due to Patty. Can't praise you enough, Patty. You did great here. But Gina was just a little nervous it looked like.
She really was, because they were asking her very pertinent, important questions. Like, what's your favorite episode? She was having trouble thinking because of nervous. It wasn't that she couldn't think of it. She was very nervous. She was like, yeah, my last episode. Yeah, like she finally spit that out, but I don't know how true that was. I think she just couldn't think of it. It's like, oh, what was your favorite scene? And then she was like, oh, the one where I fought with whatever. And it was like she was struggling to think here. It's like she must have been just so focused on her message, and it was just so overwhelming that she actually was popular again. She probably thought maybe 2 people would show up to see her, so she was probably excited that actually she had a crowd, and it was a very friendly crowd. It was a very pro Gina crowd. I mean, they were asking questions that supported her. They were saying, don't worry, we got you, and don't worry, we'll always love you, that type of stuff. Men and women love you just as much for different reasons. You're a female icon, but men love you because you're a beautiful woman and you're a great actress. It was just so yay Gina, but it was not comfortable. She was very uncomfortable the whole entire time, and that's what brought this down. Patty, with his energy, couldn't get her up. Like, no matter what he did, he just couldn't get her to be excited to be here. So it was another downer, because she was just so like, I'm hoping to come back. I haven't given up, and it's because of all you. I'm going to keep doing this. It was that type of talk. Unfortunately, that's the mood that the whole entire panel stayed at.
And thing was, she was not a bad panel. That's the thing. None of these panels were what we would call bad. As in, ending the panel early bad, or just so boring that you get up and walk about, or it wasn't a delay. It wasn't a Hercules. It was more of this just soft-spoken, low energy. She maybe needs a V8 like the rest of them.
The usual, Myrtle.
Crack a couple, Floyd.
Wow. I just had a V8. Myrtle, keep the change. Floyd, you ought to be cooking in Paris. So long, good buddies.
When you have a V8, you can't help but feel great, because V8 juice is a delicious blend of 8 vegetables. And it's nutritious, with only half the calories of orange juice.
I could have had a V8.
Suddenly it was 7 o'clock and it was all over. Like, wow, we sat through all these panels, Vesper, and we made it through. And I must say, they were not the best panels we ever sat through, but they were still worthwhile. I was glad we did all of them.
And this day actually showed us that the moderators could make or break these things.
That was it. We got up at 7 o'clock and we're like, well, do we want to stay here or do we want to go? And going won. We've been sitting in those seats for 5 hours. Our butts were hurting. Our backs were sore. We were hungry. We were uncomfortable. We did a plethora of panels today, and we bought some stuff. We had the scare of our life with that whole circle in the hallway. I was still angry about it, actually, to this point. So I was like, you know something? I had my fill. We definitely had a very, very full day. Let's get out of here. Let's get a bite to eat. Let's finish up our day properly. Now, last year we went to Boston Pizza, and it was enjoyable for what it was, and we weren't going to have time to do this tomorrow. Usually we do this on Sunday at our lunch portion, but tomorrow's schedule is actually more full than it usually is. So we were like, let's go to Boston Pizza tonight and celebrate all these panels we did. We'll have a nice little meal and end the day properly. So we went to Boston Pizza. It's about 3 blocks down in Columbus there. You go all the way down towards the stadium there that the Blue Jackets play at. We easily got in, and it was disappointing. And we're not a food review channel, but we do like to give our experience.
But here's the thing. The service was mediocre, and the food just was not that good. Like when we talked about it last year, the only really disappointing thing we had were the chips. The queso was absolutely amazing, but it was mediocre at best, and we paid each almost over $20, and this is with water to drink.
We're talking about over $20 for nothing. We got some chips with a very delicious sauce. So the sauces are very good here. I have to give him praise on that. And then I had a very stale tasting pizza, and he had a very lackluster burger pizza. It was disgusting. And we're like, I think we're going to cut out Boston Pizza from our itinerary from now on. We'll find something else great for you guys. But yeah, our praise of Boston Pizza is gone. We do not praise this place anymore.
Something's changed, folks.
They probably cut corners like everything else in the world.
Food was just mediocre. It didn't suck. It was just, why am I paying for something that I could get that tasted just as good from McDonald's?
Right. Jets for $6.50 tasted better than the $20 pizza that I got and the $20 burger pizza that he got.
Oh, and by the way, for the $6 at Jets at the convention center, you also get a drink for it.
Right. So yeah, we're done with Boston Pizza. That's just our little review. So then we headed back to the hotel.
Because we are exhausted. I went to the bathroom and then Ramses fell asleep.
And that was it. That was the end of my Saturday. I was out like a light. So yeah, that was the end of that. The whole line fiasco, I think, took it right out of me. I was so mad that whole day because of that.
Well, it was ups and downs, but I do want to emphasize before we move on to the next day that Saturday overall was probably one of the strongest set of panels we've ever been to.
Absolutely. And stay tuned to the end of this review. We're going to review all, I'm not going to give you the number yet because we'll see what happens tomorrow, but all the panels that we do will get fully reviewed and ranked, so you definitely want to stay tuned to the end.